Charles Bernard Rodney Gallery of Art. We are very honored today to have Trey Oliver as our speaker, as our artist during the art talk today. He is currently featured in the gallery hall located in the first floor. And after his art talk, after we enjoy the lovely food that he's provided, we will be going down and following him and recording it as he's talking about his work, each piece. So feel free to join us during that. And in addition, because we want this lovely event and events like this to grow, we have a survey. So before you leave, please fill out the survey, let us know what you think, and let us know what we can do better. Thank you very much. Now?
All right, Paula, thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here at the Marx Library. How lucky are we to have the University of South Alabama in our hometown. If you haven't been out here in a while like I have, you can't help but be impressed with how the campus is growing. And this library is really a nice facility. And the Rodney Gallery, Mary Rodney is in in the Mobile Art Association. And I know that she's very proud that her family is leaving a legacy behind, such as this building and this art gallery. My name is Trey Oliver. Trey's a nickname. My legal name is Noah, hence that's where Noah's art comes from. And I'm not quite like Grandma Moses, who started her art career about in her 70s, but I am a later in life bloomer. I absolutely had no desire or no interest in art growing up or as a young adult. And I do remember as a child on Dauphin Island, walking up and down the beach while we were camping out there at the campground on Dauphin Island, and I would walk to the far ends of the beach and pick up driftwood. And I always remember the romantic feeling of seeing the Dauphin Island lighthouse in the distance, rotating slowly. I think it worked back then. I'm not sure if it still works or not. But I was attracted and mesmerized by some of the beautiful pieces that Mother Nature makes with driftwood. And that sort of lingering thought never really escaped me. And while I was in the Coast Guard for a couple of years, I was stationed out in Cape Hatteras, North Carolina, the Outer Banks, and our motto was Guardians of the Graveyard. And there was probably 275 shipwrecks documented off the coast of Cape Hatteras. It was a barrier island and very narrow. In fact, there were some places that were less than a quarter of a mile. You had the Atlantic Ocean on one side and the Pamlico Sound on the other. It was a great place for beachcombing and collecting driftwood. And I can remember Kelly's mother and I, before she came into this world, we would spend hours just walking up and down the middle of the winter collecting driftwood. And I always said to myself, it's a shame you can't make something out of this. Fast forward to about 6 years ago, I was spending the week on Fort Morgan, on the peninsula over there, and I got in my canoe and I went canoeing along the Bon Secours Bay. Bon Secours has an attachment to my family. In the 1700s, 1800s, the family from Germany migrated there, and they were fishermen and shipbuilders, and during the Civil War, they were rum runners. They would run rum and sugarcane past the Yankee blockade. And my dear friend Paula Webb has a book that she wrote last year named Mobile Under Siege, is that right? Yeah. And it brought back a lot of memories talking about the Battle of Mobile Bay, the war and everything. And if you walk up and down the beach, you'll see some old bricks and remnants from the old batteries from those decades when we were protecting the bay during the war between the states. And so I'm paddling along, and I'm looking where the wind and rain has uncovered some bricks, and I started finding some really ornate pieces of driftwood. And I collected them, and I took them home, and I looked at them for a couple of weeks. And then slowly but surely, a creative side started developing, and I said, I'm going to make something out of this driftwood. So I started making collages out of wood, and before I knew it, I had like 50 pieces in my house. And I lived in a shotgun house in Church Street East, real small home. And my bug man came through about the 4th month in a row, and he's spraying for bugs under my contract. And he said, you know what, Trey, you're really coming along with your art here. And that was the first time the word art had been used. I said, what's not art? It's just driftwood. He said, I like some of these pieces. He said, I wouldn't mind having one or two in my house, which was a backhanded compliment, I guess. And I said, well, okay. And So I got to thinking about it, and I said, well, if he likes it, maybe someone else will like it. So I girded up my loins, and I went to my first art walk. Now, you want to talk about nervous. I have spoken in front of hundreds of people and never really got nervous, but I put on a straw hat and a pair of sunglasses because I didn't want anybody to know that I was selling art or that I was in any way associated with the art community. And I watched people walk by, and they would stop and they would look and admire. And I became a bit of a used car salesman. I would hide across the street and just watch for an art walk. And if they would stop or slow down and look, I would make note of that, which pieces were attracting them. If they touched them, that's when I moved in for the kill. And I would come up and I would say, is something speaking to you? That was a pretty artsy question, I thought. Is something speaking to you? No, the driftwood doesn't speak, and they would say, yes, it is. It's the colors. And I tried to act like I knew what I was talking about. I did not. And then I sold 9 pieces that night, 9 pieces of art. I thought I had won the Emmys as far as I was concerned. I took my sunglasses off, took my hat off, and then I slowly warmed up to it. If no one has ever put anything out there that you've made, it's nerve-wracking because you just know it's quirky, it's goofy, and no one's going to like it. And most people don't like it, and you have to get used to that, and then you develop thick skin. But those folks that do like it, and when they tell you that they connect with it somehow, then there's a feeling about that. And selling art is not why I do it. On a personal note, the reason why I do art is because I have a very stressful job. And at one time I thought I was bipolar. And I told my doctor, I said, I think I'm bipolar. He said, why do you say that? I said, well, because I forget my keys, I lose my temper, I'm fussing at my kids, I take out my anger from work on my family. And he said, no, you're not bipolar. I said, yeah, I'm bipolar. And I said, I bought this book, and it says I am. It said Bipolar for Dummies. And he chuckled and said, where'd you go to med school? He's been a smart aleck. He's a friend of mine. I said, okay, listen, I'm not trying to tell you how to do your job. There's something wrong with you. He said, all right. He said, if you insist, I'll test you. And I tested. It cost $900 and some odd, took 4 hours of my time. And he came back and said, I told you, you're not bipolar. I said, yeah. I said, oh, that's good news. He said, no, wait, I didn't say there wasn't anything wrong with you. he said, there's plenty wrong with you. I said, what do you mean? He said, well, you suffer from an acute level of tension and anxiety. I said, what does that mean? He said, you're burned out on your job. You've been doing it for 30 years, and it's stressful. He said, it's natural. We see it all the time. I said, okay. I said, you can give me a little yellow pill to make me feel better, right? He says, no. He said, didn't you mention you're doing art? And I said, yeah. And none of my friends knew I did art. I said, that's our secret, Doc. And he said, I want you to do more art. He said, it's relaxing, isn't it? I said, yeah, when I do my art, I escape and I get distracted and detached from everything. And I'm in my own little zone for hours at a time. He said, do more art and do more Christian meditation. And so I took his advice, and sure enough, I saw a big difference over about 1.5 years. And then I started painting. It just wasn't enough to make something out of driftwood. And to me, half the fun is getting to my canoe or my old sailboat and just going along isolated beaches and searching for driftwood. And you have to go to isolated beaches because where driftwood typically accumulates is at the trashy side of the bay. It's not, you won't find much driftwood at Fairhope because of the way the prevailing winds and the currents are. So you have to go sort of the mouth of Mobile Bay, and that's where I go. And I think I'm able to go to most places, or places where most people wouldn't dare venture, because sometimes there's snakes and sometimes there's alligators, and that just keeps my competition away. And so after a while, I said, well, I'm going to paint something. So I'm driving down the road one day, and someone had thrown out an old canvas painting. It was a print, actually. I looked around, made sure no one was looking. I grabbed it, put it in my truck, took it home, painted over the canvas, and I painted what I would call I don't know any other way to describe it. It looked like a tribe of walking sticks marching over a hill with flowers exploding over it. And I just went with what I felt like. I didn't have a vision in sight or anything. And so I finished it after about a week, working on it for about a total of 6 or 7 hours. And I took it to the next art walk, and I'll be darned if not within 20 minutes, this guy comes along. Now I got my straw hat and my sunglasses back on because I'm across the street. I know they're going to make fun of this first painting. And this first guy looked at it, stopped. He touched it, and I said, son of a gun, I bet the jackpot. Lightning does strike twice. So I took my hat and sunglasses off and run over and I said, is something speaking to you about that painting? He said, are you the artist? And I said, yeah. Then I sort of braced myself like you would say, well, that's about the stupidest looking thing I've ever seen. He said, that's the most, what was the word he used? He said, it's the most archaic and primitive, but quirky piece I've ever seen. And I wasn't sure if that was good or bad. And then he says, how much do you want for it? And I told him, he says, it's mine, I'll buy it. Well, again, I thought I'd won an Emmy Award, you know. I mean, and I'll take autographs after this if you want. But the thing is that sort of validated that, yes, we artists, we're a little quirky, aren't we? We're a little weird, we're a little different. But you got to be to come up with some of this wild stuff. And then the epitome of my art journey was last summer. This lady came into town from New Orleans, of all places, where there's plenty of artsy, right? She is the corporate interior designer for the Ruby Slipper. And they were building a restaurant here in town. And that was about the same time I found out that I knew someone, and you all know him too, Bill Morris, is that his name? Yeah, Bill Morris has artwork hanging up in the Vatican. Wow, it doesn't get much cooler than that, right? And his work has been featured on stamps and things. And so the next time I saw him, I said, Bill, well, look out, I'm in hot pursuit, I'm right behind you. He said, what you mean? I said, I got a piece hanging in a very prominent place. He said, where's that? I said, Ruby Slipper on Royal Street. He said, I said, we're not to the Vatican yet, but I am on my way. And that piece that they bought was really quirky because I went to some old homes they were tearing down in Midtown and got the old door siding, and I made my first frame. Now, my husband-in-law just walked in, and he's a woodwork crafter. He does really good woodwork. He probably can build a cabinet. I can't saw one board straight, but somehow, David, I was able to cut these two pieces, and I made a big frame. And then I discovered a stockpile of old antique tile that was buried underground, about a foot deep behind, close to Murphy High School. And that tile came from the 20s and the 30s. And so I took that tile and what they call that, plastic wood and wood putty, and covered up all my gaping holes and mistakes. But it really made a nice looking frame. And then I painted a painting that depicted old Mobile. It showed a couple in an old Duesenberg going down Royal Street with the top down, their hair blowing in the wind. It was really out there. And I'll be damned, this lady would come to buy it. She said, that's just what we want for our restaurant, because they retrofitted that building from the old National Bank that was built in the early 1900s. So that's not why I do art, but it certainly is a bonus. It's a little extra. And along the way, especially the last 5 years, I've done a lot of reading. I've taken some classes under Devin Wilson and Cat Pope and some other renowned local artists. And I stumbled across this dilemma about inspiration. I can't tell you how many times I hear people say, I'm waiting to be inspired to make my next project. I'm waiting to be inspired to write my next song or to sew my next quilt or whatever. So I got to think about this thing called inspiration. It is elusive. But I'm going to stop right there and I'm going to ask you, have you figured out what these artists have in common yet? So, for the sake of the Facebook, Reese Witherspoon, Lady Gaga, Jim Carrey, Ellen DeGeneres, Harrison Ford. Most of these are actors and actresses. Dolly Parton, performers, a few songwriters. J.K. Rowling, a well-known author. Anybody got a guess what do these artists have in common? Sir?
Performing artists.
Well, most of them are. There's a few exceptions there. They all have suffered with acute depression. They have all suffered and managed acute depression, some alcoholism, some tension and anxiety. But the good news is most of them bounce back from it. And that second group is the same thing. And when you look at some of these devastating things that occurred in these great artists' life, like Claude Monet, in 1911, his wife died, and he almost became a recluse, and he didn't paint for a long time. But when he did come out, he painted that 300-foot long painting of a lake that's probably about 8 feet tall. It's 22 panels. It's considered to be worth in the millions of dollars. You look at Georgia O'Keeffe. She was hospitalized, fear of public failure, and she had a difficult husband. And after she got out of the hospital, and after she went off the grid for about 4 or 5 years, she came back and painted 3 of her most top valuable, most celebrated pieces. Pablo Picasso went through a divorce and a custody battle, and his girlfriend had his daughter out of wedlock. Now that's a lot of stress in 1 year, I suppose. And he did Weeping Woman and I forgot how you pronounce that second one, both very celebrated pieces worth millions each. And I really like this story here with Barbara Hepworth. In 1951, her son died in the war, and she was separated from her painter lover, Ben Nicholson. And she went on, after 8 years, there was, I'm sorry, I'm getting her and Agnes Martin mixed up. She went for years without painting. She came back and painted 1, 2, 3, no, she was a sculptor. She created 3 of her most celebrated works. And then Agnes Martin, in 67, she was so depressed, so put out with art that she gave away all of her materials, fled New York, built a home in New Mexico. You talk about going off the grid. And there was no evidence of her painting for 7 years. And then all of a sudden, she just picked up her piece and went back at it. So all of these people dealt with trying to find inspiration. And I love here what Chuck Close said. He said, inspiration is for amateurs. The rest of us just show up and get to work. I never had painter's block in my whole life. And I've never met an artist that didn't have writer's block or painter's block or something. But I have been thinking a lot about art, about inspiration, and I've decided that it's not something you can wait on. And I just wrote some thoughts here. I'm glad Susan Martin is not here, Dr. Martin from South, because she is a trained professional poet, and I know she'll be grading me on my grammar, but this is not supposed to be a point. It's just some thoughts about inspiration and finding it, and seeking it, and cultivating it. It says, inspiration, like money, you will not find it in a tree. Inspiration, like time, cannot be saved for you or me. Inspiration, like moods, come and go, usually ebbs and sometimes flows. Inspiration is not the farmer behind plowing the row. Picture that in your mind. It's not the mule mightily pulling to and fro. Instead, inspiration is the plow breaking new soil, exposing fresh dirt, turning over ground of old, waiting for seeds for you to sow. Inspiration is not a jet, bus, or train you hope to catch. Inspiration cannot be bought by the pound, box, or batch. You would do well in art to heed this advice. Waiting on the right moment may only come once or twice. Instead, pick up that pen, grab that brush, sink, seek, go deeper, deeper still, looking for that slow motion, faint whisper, not a rush, a glimmer, a hope, a twist. Follow your will. Yesterday is history. Tomorrow is a mystery. Inspiration only comes in the present moment. So be wise where you search and how you look, but always seek on computer, in nature, or a book. Be on the lookout indeed. Merely create and breathe. And the word inspiration comes from either the Greek word to inspire or to inhale, to breathe. So inspiration is not something we sit around to wait on. If you do that, you may never delve into art. And I'm a big believer that all of us have creative sides. We just may not have tapped into it yet. That certainly was my case. And for those of you on the fence that maybe like me was dealing with a lot of stress and tension and anxiety in your life, you're looking for something that's cheaper than drinking. And if your golf swing sucks like mine does, you got to have something to take the edge off. And art can do that for you. So I encourage you to take a class this summer, to pick up something that inspires you, that motivates you. It could be history. A lot of my pieces I found the inspiration for them, and I'll tell those stories as we take a tour downstairs here in a few minutes. So with that, if anybody's got any questions, I'll be glad to answer them.
I liked your poem.
Oh, thank you, ma'am. Thank you. Thank you. Well, it was supposed to be a poem, but it just sort of started that way, and I said, well, I'll just stick to it. But it came from the heart.
Is there anything, Trey, that you have created that you're not showing, haven't shown, or it's somewhere hidden in the closet, in the garage, that you will never, ever go back to again?
Right now, no ma'am, there's not. Those pieces, I modified, I had some pieces like that. I have since modified them and now they're out. So,
Okay.
and what was interesting is, you know, college students, they're unfiltered. And I've stood around the halls downstairs and watched college students come and go. And they'll tell you point blank whether they like it or not. And one of those pieces that I haven't questioned, this young lady stopped and she went right up to it. And I said, wow, that thing talked right. And I walked up to her and I said, "Was something speaking to you?" And she said, "It's not the colors." Well, I won't tell you anything else because you know what piece I'm talking about. She said, "I would love to have that piece." She said, "I collect art." And I struck up a conversation with her and I said, "Well, who do you like? Which of the old masters do you like?" She told me which one she liked. She said, "But I don't like going to a gallery to buy art. I want to buy art from real folks." And she said, "Are you the artist?" And I said, "Yes, ma'am, I am." And she said, "Well, you're a real folk." And I said, well, thank you. And she looked at how much it is, and she said, "I can't afford that." And half of me wanted to say, "Well, I'll give it to you, you know, but it's too expensive to give away." So I did mark it down just a few dollars, you know, hoping that maybe she might come back. But I used to have a few pieces like that, and I've got a few pieces that are a little bit on the edge. A friend of mine paid me a compliment the other day. He's a great oil painter, very accomplished. And he said, this is him talking, he said, don't confuse me and Trey. He said, "I'm a replicator." He says, "Trey," and I won't say it in front of Facebook camera, but Trey creates some weird stuff sometimes. And I took that as a compliment because, you know, it's original and you just follow. I mean, you know, some artists have to paint what people will buy because they're trying to make a living at it. I'm not trying to make a living at this. So I don't have to. I have painted houses for people, painted portraits of their home. I've painted, and that's rewarding, sort of, but it's nothing quite like creating something that's really out there and someone come along and connect with it and say, "I want to buy that."
What is your dream size of painting or abstract or creation you would like to do that you have not done yet?
My dream.
Your dream. We all have a dream. Would you like to, paint the side of the building, or how big would you like to do the next driftwood installation?
Yeah, you know what? I think I'm sort of living my dream right now. I have arrived. I'm fine. I'm on borrowed time right now. You know, I've got a piece of ruby slipper. I can retire now from my hard career, right? Okay, well listen, we have a little reception here. We got Cammie's Old Dutch ice cream. Cammie herself, and Cammie's she's very artistic in her own right. She's an entrepreneur. She worked for the Wiedemeyers when she was 16 years old. Came back a few years after then and bought the place, and now you can find Cammie's Old Dutch ice cream in your local supermarket and at different drugstores and things. So she's a local Mobile success story, and I love Mobile and I love all things Mobile. The cheesecake came from the Iron Hand, which is now in the old Waterfront Rescue Mission at 206 State Street. So I recommend you going by there. I love supporting local businesses, homegrown businesses. I think that's what keeps Mobile quirky is it's local people that are in business. So we'll hang out here for a reception for about 15, 20 minutes, then we'll go downstairs and tour my work.